Hi everyone. So sorry about the slight chaos in the background, it's a little bit messy. It's actually a whole lot worse than what you can see in frame. My whole apartment is complete chaos because I'm recording this on Monday and I am leaving Edinburgh in less than 48 hours. So everything is just in that kind of final stage of packing where everything is out on the floor, on surfaces, on the couch, everywhere. And the final kind of things are going into boxes and being kind of segregated, and it's complete madness. And I basically have about 4 more hours tonight to kind of get all of this into relative composure. I am, however, feeling better now than I was last week about the move and about everything in general. I think I have made peace again with the move back to Ireland. I'm feeling more positive and excited about it. I think this time last week, it wasn't so much that I was feeling like I badly wanted to stay in Edinburgh. I was just feeling very uncertain in general about life and about just where I was going and how I should be feeling about my move and just what I can take away from this experience and all of that. But I think I have managed to kind of work through some of that this week and kind of close some doors that needed to be closed and just do what emotionally needed to be done, I guess, in order to get me to a point of being able to leave. But that's not really what I'm going to talk about today. I instead want to talk about something a bit more specific that has come up because of the kind of week that I've had, and that is the question of suspension of disbelief. So this is something that has come up for me over and over again in my practice, I feel, because I'm a relatively skeptical pagan, I'm a relatively skeptical spiritual person in general. I definitely don't hold a lot of sort of woo-woo type beliefs. And I tend to just operate on a very kind of skeptical basis around most things that happen to me in my life, and even around my feelings to connecting to divinity and so on. It's on a very kind of rational basis, on a often very metaphorical basis, where even if I am kind of working with specific deities, it's often seeing them as archetypes, and my understanding of divinity is fairly vague. And I don't necessarily feel like there's an entity that can hear me or anything like that. And I have talked about that over and over again on the channel. But that being said, I definitely go through times when either I am feeling like I'm believing more, or at least open to a potential belief in strange things happening. And sometimes strange things just happen and it doesn't really shift my belief system at all, but it still happens, and I still kind of have to, or I find it useful to look at those experiences from a perspective of a slightly different belief system to what I actually hold. And that's kind of what I mean by suspension of disbelief. So I find myself sometimes talking to friends and talking to people in general about experiences that I've had, and I describe those experiences in terms of spiritual or kind of woo-woo type understandings of the world. So the reason that all this came about is because I recently had, and not for the first time, I recently had a very strange experience last Thursday of kind of having a day where I just felt like the universe was talking directly to me. And I can't say necessarily that I strictly felt the whole time that this was in my head. And I also can't say that I strictly believed that any entity or the actual universe was actually speaking to me. I find that when these days happen and when these experiences happen, I kind of operate in this strange liminal place, kind of hovering around between two different belief systems, and I'm willing to kind of suspend my normal belief system in favor of making sense of the experience of the day in light of a slightly different belief system, because I just find it more helpful. I just find it to be kind of more productive. And and then when I'm explaining those experiences to other people, I tend to find that the most useful, the easiest way to do that, the easiest way to describe that experience is by almost kind of, I always give the caveat of sort of, I don't actually believe in this, but then I will use kind of language that kind of suggests that I do believe that I'm actually receiving a message from the universe. That's a really convoluted way of explaining this, but I think when I tell more specific stories, that'll become a bit clearer. So I don't have any particular kind of nugget of wisdom or information ready in mind for this video. This is more just a thought that I've been having and a topic that I felt was relevant to me right now, and I just wanted to share a couple of things and kind of go from there. So I'm not going to go into any great detail about what kind of triggered these thoughts for me, because the day in question last week, when I was wandering around the city and felt this sense of like receiving messages, it was around a very personal and private situation in my life that I don't feel that I don't feel comfortable sharing online, and also that I don't think you need to know about. But suffice to say that I was in a kind of strange state of mind anyway. There was a lot going on. I was processing a lot of stuff. I was doing a lot of errands that were like tying up loose ends around the city, and I was kind of tying up loose ends emotionally and thinking through a lot of different things and kind of sorting out in my head how I was going to process certain kind of feelings and problems that I've been facing coming towards the end of living here. And I think sometimes when you're in that state of mind, you do get that kind of heightened sense of awareness in this kind of heightened state, and it is very easy to start finding meaning in the mundane and finding meaning around you. And I was thinking about that a lot as well. And what I found was that I had experienced two kind of unrelated experiences of what felt like messages. And one of them was quite like relatively vague and like required a lot of kind of me thinking through like, how can I make sense of this? I can't really explain why I decided in that moment to understand what I had read in there was 3 different places that I saw these different phrases that came together in my mind as this kind of message. I can't explain what it was that made me feel like it was going to be useful to me to understand that as a message, especially because it was quite vague. But that just was what felt useful to me in that moment. And I have just always found this to be helpful to me in my spirituality. Like, even though I feel like, rationally speaking, that I don't believe that the universe can speak to me and give me messages, that's all very well when I'm thinking about my theology or my philosophy of life and talking to other people about what I actually believe and so on. That's all very well. But then when it comes to actual practical living, sometimes it's more useful to suspend that disbelief and kind of take on a certain belief system almost as a tool and just run with it. And because I move in circles online and sometimes offline as well in kind of real life, because I move in circles where I meet a lot of people who hold those kind of beliefs, that they believe that the universe can speak to them and give them direct messages through their surroundings, it's very easy for me to slip into that way of thinking. Like, I'm very well versed and very fluent in that kind of language of the universe speaking to someone. And I found it very helpful. I found it very emotionally helpful in that moment. It bolstered me. It helped me make a decision that needed to be made. It helped me to do something and open up a conversation that needed to be opened up. And ultimately, yes, the results of doing that were very positive, I feel. And I think it also helped bring about a great sense of calm. I was already feeling quite calm that day, because I think often when you're in this kind of state of mind where everything feels very meaningful, it's almost like a magical state of mind. It's very close to a kind of religious experience, I think, and I think it's almost like a particular mental state, I find, almost like a state of consciousness. And I always find that when I'm in that state of consciousness, a great sense of calm kind of comes over me. So I was already feeling very calm for the first time in probably a week. I woke up feeling calm, and I was walking around feeling calm and kind of going, interesting, like, where did my anxiety go? This is brilliant. I was really, really happy about it, because I hate having to make decisions and process things while in a state of panic or anxiety or uncertainty, or just generally feeling tumultuous. I really, really like to get to a point of feeling very calm and centered and grounded before I make any decisions or kind of take any steps or kind of put any change or put my truth out into the world. But definitely kind of feeling like I had, or telling myself that I had, or choosing to believe that I had received this message was really helpful to me. It definitely helped me work through that process and work through that day and just do everything that needed to be done, and to feel relatively content, relatively okay with the kind of outcome of the day, of what otherwise could have been a very emotionally, a day of huge emotional upheaval. And then the second message that I received, I feel like I have to put everything in kind of air quotes, was a lot more on the nose. It was a lot more like, it wasn't really, so the first message was kind of more to something, felt like an answer to a question I'd been asking myself, the universe, I don't know. The second message was not so much a direct answer to anything. It was just kind of, I guess, what felt like an answer to a general question that I'd been having about sort of why did I come here? Like what was the main thing that I came to Edinburgh for? Like what did I most get out of Edinburgh? Was there any sort of meaning to me coming here? And that was very on the nose. It was very Morrigan style, you know, here's your answer. Like right, okay, you know, stop pissing around here. This is your answer. There you go. Which was very amusing to me. And it wasn't even at that moment in time, I knew that something strange had happened in that moment, because I kind of clocked half of the message and was like, oh, that's really weird. And it wasn't until I think the next day or maybe 2 days later that the full meaning of it hit me on the bus, and I was like, I had that moment of kind of being like, okay, that's really weird, because like I say, it doesn't fit with my belief system, it doesn't fit with my worldview that there is a literal deity, you know, giving me this message and saying, yeah, I did this, I made this happen in your life. Doesn't make any sense within my actual belief system, and yet that was what I experienced. This was this message that I received, and and again, I think that that message in particular wasn't as like necessarily immediately helpful to me. It wasn't something that I felt like I really badly needed to hear, but it was an interesting thing for me to think about. It offered a kind of extra interesting component to this whole experience of wrapping up my life here and kind of looking back on the 4 years I spent here and thinking about the meaning of it and what I've learned and what I'm taking back with me to Ireland. But yeah, I think what was most interesting to me about all of this is, like I say, that like whenever I have these experiences, I don't tend to have a big conversion moment. I've had so many of these experiences, these kind of uncanny experiences in my life, and particularly in the time of like moving, kind of making the decision to come to Edinburgh, moving to Edinburgh, first getting to Edinburgh, and then now while I'm leaving. Maybe because those have been very emotionally heightened times in my life. Maybe I've just been in that kind of mental state. Oh, there's also been a few ones kind of during my stay here. Like I had one weird uncanny experience that I did talk about on the channel. I made a video about it. It'll be up in the thingy. And I didn't explain that again. Sorry, I didn't explain it in any detail at all, because again, it was around kind of personal life and stuff that I don't share and talk about on the channel. So I have had a lot of these weird experiences, but I find that like no matter how often they happen, and no matter how helpful emotionally and spiritually they feel to me in the moment, I don't actually come away from them with any changed belief system. I don't come away from them with a different faith, with a changed understanding of the world. And I think originally I found this to be quite frustrating. I think especially after I first came to Edinburgh and I had some of the most kind of notable of those types of experiences yet that I'd ever had in my life, or I had certainly had in a long time. I felt very frustrated when I realised that whatever shift in perception and belief was not sticking, and it was kind of, you know, almost like water off a duck's back, that I was having the weird experience and going, wow, maybe the universe works in a different way to how I have ever imagined, or, you know, to how science can explain. But I found that I would just kind of slip away from that again, and it just wouldn't stick. It kind of wouldn't stick to me as a changed belief system, as a conversion experience. And I did find that frustrating. I felt a bit like, I think despite the fact that ever since I returned to spirituality in my kind of early to mid 20s, I have been making peace with the idea that I can be a relatively sort of atheistic spiritual person, a relatively kind of secular spiritual person, somebody who sees spirituality as being more metaphor maybe than literal descriptions of how the world works and so on. I have definitely been trying to make peace with that for, you know, not 10 years yet, but, you know, probably 7 or 8 years at this point. And you would think that at some point that would have just kind of sunk in, but I feel like for a long time I believed on some level that while I went through this spiritual journey, that I was actually going to gradually make my way towards a belief system that maybe was a bit more classically spiritual, a bit more woo-woo, that kind of, I don't know, that over time, if I had enough spiritual experiences through doing all of these practices and doing ritual and just aligning myself with that way of thinking, that over time that my beliefs would change. And it's not that my beliefs haven't changed. I definitely feel like my thoughts about reality and how the universe operates and my place in it, all of that definitely has evolved over time. But maybe not in the directions that I would have expected it to go. Like, I think maybe I thought that eventually I would turn into a more of a kind of classical pagan, or I don't know, somebody who looked more like a just traditionally religious person, what you expect. Somebody who I don't know, seemed more to your average person like someone who believed in God or something like that. And I think right now I'm starting to realise that it's not a bad thing if that never happens. And I'm not totally sure why, on some level, that I kept expecting that to happen or wanting that to happen. I think there was just always a part of me that thought I would be happier if that change happened. And I'm just really finally starting to realise, now that I've had yet another of these experiences, I'm starting to realise, like, no, this is where I've kind of landed. And I landed here a long time ago, like, you know, relatively early on in my 20s. I landed into this kind of belief system. A belief system that definitely allows for the unexpected, that allows for mystery, that, you know, I definitely would never dismiss entirely the possibility that I am connecting to something outside of my consciousness, and things like that. Like, I would never be totally dismissive of the possibility of some of this actually meaning something beyond just something I've concocted in my own head. But I don't know, I'm finally starting to realise that's enough. Just having that openness to kind of further possibilities without ever kind of satisfying it and coming to some big changed conclusion, that's okay, and that is more me than having some big kind of revelation and deciding that I suddenly believe in something that I kind of never really did before in my life. So it's just been kind of an interesting experience for me. Another good example of this kind of thing is a few stories that I was telling a couple of friends yesterday, when I was kind of briefly touching on this weird experience that I had, this weird day where it just felt like all these messages kept popping up, and yeah, very weird day. I was explaining how while living in Edinburgh, I think it's only happened like 4 times. I've had the only ever experiences that another person might describe as paranormal. I have had, like I say, 3 or 4 times that things have happened to me. I've seen things, experienced things that have made me realise, like, oh, this is what people experience when they describe seeing ghosts. And yet I don't believe in ghosts. Not in any, I mean, I think that's just the easiest way to put it. I don't believe in ghosts. And it's another kind of perfect example of this. And I find myself telling the stories of what happened and what I experienced. I saw something in my apartment over a course of several nights one time. I had another spate of kind of weird experiences in an apartment that were more kind of touch oriented while falling asleep, and of a light coming on late at night one time, again around kind of a specific period of time. I have seen things out of the corner of my eye a lot around this, again in this flat, and something kind of crossed the corridor. And I also had an experience in a friend's apartment where I, for the first time in my life, experienced and understood what people meant when they said that they felt a presence. It was the first time I ever felt such a strong, like a very specific human, or human-like presence in a room where there was nobody there. And I was looking at the room and I couldn't see anything, and yet felt entirely convinced that there was somebody in the room. And like I say, none of those experiences have changed my belief. I still don't believe in ghosts. That's not what I believe was going on. Do I believe it was all in my head? Potentially. Do I believe something else was happening on maybe some of those occasions? Maybe. I'm always kind of happy to leave it open to the potential of something that I can't fully explain. Although my go-to explanation is this is just something that's happening in my head. It is interesting to me though that all of this has happened while in Edinburgh within a relatively short space of time, and like I say, most of it in this apartment. And it makes me wonder, like, will this happen again? Is it something about this flat that I kind of experienced that? I don't know. But yeah, I find that interesting. Like, and when I tell these stories to people, again, like I say, as I tell the story, I tell it as though I believe in spirits, as though I believe that there was something in the room who did this, that I saw. I say, I saw a man in my room. I saw a figure cross the corridor. And then I will always follow it up, or, open the story or close the story or both, bookend it with caveat, I don't actually believe in ghosts. But this was my experience, and I always describe the experience in terms of the kind of language that people use to describe a paranormal experience, usually of a spirit or a ghost. So yeah, I definitely, I'm definitely noticing a pattern here that this is something that has happened to me maybe more actually over the past 4 years than ever before in my life, that I kind of have these experiences that are kind of seem kind of classically spiritual, that other people would describe in paranormal terms, or, you know, in sort of, supernatural terms, that I can have conversations with other people then who have had similar experiences and have interpreted them as being an experience of you know, a spirit or a ghost or a supernatural experience, and we can have that conversation. And I find that really, those conversations really interesting to have, because I'm always curious to see what other people's experiences have been and how they've interpreted those experiences. I find that really interesting. But like I say, it hasn't actually changed my beliefs whatsoever. That in itself is probably an interesting thing, really, isn't it? Because I know a lot of people who believe in ghosts who've never seen anything, never experienced anything that they would describe as a supernatural experience, and yet they believe. And yet I have seen ghosts, experienced ghosts, but I don't believe in them. And I think it's a really, really strange and interesting paradox of belief and experience, and how the two things, while they are definitely interlinked, they're not related in as straightforward a way as I think we often think they are. I think we always, you know, kind of tacitly assume that our beliefs are purely based around our experiences, and if we haven't experienced something, then we're less likely to believe in it. And that may be the case sometimes, but I definitely not always. And this has been interesting to me. And yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for, like I say, using belief as a tool, and, you know, just moving around different belief systems and worldviews in order to make sense and to unpack a specific experience. And you don't have to land there. You can just explore that experience through that taxonomy, through that kind of discourse, and see what you can unpack from it and see where you end up through using that. And then at the end of the day, you can kind of put that to one side and say, you know, I can explore all sorts of different explanations for what I might have seen or what I might have experienced, and then at the end of the day put it to one side and say, but realistically I think it probably just happened in my head. But it's still interesting and useful to me to explore it as though it didn't just happen in my head, and just feel out what that might mean for me, and just in general. So yeah, I think that's everything that I want to say about that today. I've probably made videos about this in the past, but I don't think I've ever gone into such detail about it. Like I said, there was that one video that I made where I was feeling particularly shaken by a sort of a Morrigan experience about 2 years ago. And I will have linked that up above. But yeah, oh, and of course the kind of infamous video when I came to Edinburgh first and was describing like feeling like the Morrigan had led me here and led me to this specific flat and all of that, and that'll also be linked up above. But yeah, I definitely think that this time around I'm feeling a lot more rooted in this reality that I have a certain belief system. That belief system doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and yet I have experiences that don't mesh with that, and I'm okay with that. Like I'm actually fine with that. I'm comfortable with that. Like I'm comfy in my skepticism, but also in having kind of experiences that don't necessarily run within the boundaries of that. A pure skeptic, of course, wouldn't even be having this conversation, because they would have dismissed the entire thing so completely out of hand that they never would have even considered that some words that they saw somewhere were a message at all. It wouldn't have even entered their mind. So I guess that's what I mean when I say that I'm kind of in this liminal space between two worldviews. While I don't feel like I identify with this kind of more spiritual worldview, I still hold it in enough regard, and it's still enough at the forefront of my mind that it will shape my experience of the world. You know, seeing something out of the corner of my eye, if I was a true and full skeptic, it wouldn't even occur to me to interpret it as being something in my flat, or a figure, or a ghost, or a spirit. It wouldn't even occur to me to see it in that context. So it's interesting, yeah, I suppose maybe we have multiple different layers of different types of beliefs, and that maybe some of them are ones that we've moved away from, but that they still kind of play a big role in our lives and in shaping our experiences. And that's okay too. You know, we can kind of hold those multiple beliefs and look at them and kind of go, okay, yeah, like maybe there's a part of me that believes that this is what's happening. Most of me doesn't, but that's okay. You know, we can work with that and make sense of it. And like I say, ultimately allowing myself this room to explore my experiences through a different kind of worldview is helpful. It's just helpful. It's emotionally helpful. It got me through a very difficult week and a very difficult day. And yeah, I'm quite glad that if nothing else, if my spiritual practice over the past 8 years has done nothing else, that at least it has maybe paved the way for me to be able to understand my different times in my life and different experiences through this different kind of light and through this different perception, and to find meaning in that way, in this kind of new way that maybe 10 or 12 years ago that I wouldn't have been able to. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. I hope you're all doing well. I hope that the next time I'm talking to you, actually I might make another video immediately after this, so that I will have a little bit of a break from, you know, having to make videos, because once I land back in Dublin, it's going to be chaos still until I can unpack and settle down. So yeah, the next time you see me, I might still be in this flat, but the next time after that, it'll be from Ireland, and I'll have a new setup, and who knows, it'll all be, yeah, all new. So yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for following. Sorry for not replying to comments for the past few weeks. It's just all been a bit crazy. Bear with me, I will get back to them eventually. And yeah, I'll talk to you again soon.